Welcome everybody. Welcome to Justin, our new instructor. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. As a matter of public service and governmental transparency, this meeting may be recorded, streamlined live, and/or accessed at a later time. Note this may or may not include video and audio of all people present. Number 2 on the agenda is citizens' comments. This is the time we set aside for citizens to come before us and talk about planning and zoning related matters that are not related to the public hearings or on the agenda items. I don't see anyone. Was there any comments from the
Nothing called in or
citizens?
emailed, no.
All right, moving along to item 3. That is the approval of our April 26, 2023 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Made sure everyone's names was spelled correctly and the commas were all good?
Sure. I move that
Kevin.
we approve the minutes from the April 26th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I would second that motion.
Heard the motion, heard the second. Let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries. Next item on our list is the approval of a reasoned statement of relative criteria and standards. We are going to disregard that. We did that at our last meeting. Item 5, we are going to have an update on the comprehensive plan rewrite from Logan Simpson.
Yep, so online, we have Emily and Joe with Logan Simpson, who are our comprehensive plan consultants. And so I am going to turn it over to them.
Sounds great, thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Thank you.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation here. Are you able to see that?
We see it, Joe, yes.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'm going to hop in here, I guess, to introduce ourselves. Again, I'm Joe Moss with Logan Simpson, and we'll kind of get into it here. We've got a presentation and a couple questions and things for you and give you an update on the general process. So our agenda includes kind of going through, what the plan is, what the project is, kind of what we're working on currently, what we've done public outreach wise, and then we'll get into the questions we have for this group today before getting into our next steps. So before we hop into that, I want to get to know you all a little bit. I'm going to introduce our project team. I am Joe Moss, and again, Logan Simpson Design. I'm one of the co-project managers with Emily Morales. I'm working out of our Salt Lake City office, and she's in our Fort Collins office. And we're on the team, obviously, with Bruce Megan, our fierce leader here at Logan Simpson. And we are working with a team of pretty great sub-consultants on the project as well. We've got Chris Stanley with Vitruvian Planning down in Boise. We've got Chris Oz with Leland Consulting Group, and Kittleson and Associates with Nick helping out with the transportation aspects of the project. So I guess to help us get to know you guys a little bit more, and I know that I do see a couple familiar faces from our steering committee, but I'm wondering if we could just go around the room and let us know, your name and one thing you would hope that Lewiston would be known for in the future.
Kathy, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Branson, and I would like to see Lewiston become a destination city known for its beautiful rivers.
Great.
I'm Gabe Icaboni. I also am on the steering committee and was involved in one of the interviews. I would like Lewiston to be known for its vibrant community, and I'll leave that fairly open and vague because it can mean many different things, but they're all positive in my opinion. So.
I'm Mike Bush. I think I'd like to see Lewiston kind of in the same vein as Kathy, a destination where we can enjoy recreation, outdoor activities, and raise a family.
I'm Justin Merwin. I'm gonna have to agree with Gabe here on the community aspect. I'm a big family man, so I like to see towns that family can prosper in.
Cindy Ball. For me, Lewiston is kind of the larger but little town feel, you know, where there, community activities, outdoors, so more family oriented.
Kevin Kelly, I'm also on the steering committee, and my vision would be for Lewiston to be the economic hub of North Idaho, while also being a great place to raise a family.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate those answers and that feedback. It's good to get to know you a little bit and kind of what you obviously love about your community, and hope that we get to share that with others, and the things we kind of hope for the future. So I guess looking at this project, I know a lot of you are probably familiar with comprehensive plans, so forgive me if we're covering things that maybe you're already aware of, but you know, this plan is a community informed document, right? So it's really trying to get that vision for what the community wants to be in the future. And it should serve as a primary reference for you all when you're making decisions, when you know, when Joel and Katie bring a decision in front of you, you have a tool that you can bounce that off of, and you know, get to make a decision that's in line with the visions and goals of the community at large. So this plan does include a lot of facets. Idaho state law requires, I think, no less than 17 or so aspects. But you know, we'll cover all of those in the plan, but a lot of those revolve around things like obviously land use, but also other things like, you know, transportation and housing, and even into well-being and resiliency. So a lot of different angles of this plan. It's really you know, comprehensive is really the right word to describe it. One of the things that we did put together here is kind of this little arc of the project timeline here. So phase one, what we're really doing here is trying to figure out where we're at, right? This is the foundation stage. We're digging, doing some research, trying to get an understanding of the community, kind of what they want to see, what their priorities are, and then getting to know kind of some of the data. You know, we're working on some things like existing conditions and things at that point, to, which we'll get into in a minute. But in this timeline, we're kind of right at the end of phase one. So we're wrapping this one up, and then we're going to be going into phase two, which is discovering what that vision for the community is. And we're going to be pulling together some opportunities and things and talking those through with the community and having them make some choices as to what they want for the future. And then finally, phase three, we'll be drafting the actual plan, and that will be hopefully back into the city council for final approval in summer of next year. So we've got another good 12 months or so in front of us, but that kind of gives you a lay of the land as to where we're at with the project. And again, feel free to jump in if you have any questions at any time. I know we'll have some opportunities for questions at the end, but feel free to stop me if there's anything that comes up.
Joe, could I ask that you maybe just talk a little bit about how there's going to be outreach at each of these phases, but also the health part and the Blue Cross of Idaho Foundation component of the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's right, Emily. The public engagement is really baked into every phase of the project. We'll go over as kind of what we've done so far in the public engagement for phase one, but phase two will be basically taking all of the things we've heard so far back to the community and saying, hey, this is what we heard. You know, is this right? Is this resonating with what your understanding of the community and what you want for the future is? So we'll be baking, you know, that'll be our phase two. And then phase three is, you know, hey, this is what we heard. This is what, you know, we kind of pulled those threads a little more, still checking in with the community to make sure that it's the right fit. Because obviously if it's not something that's well suited to Lewiston, it's not going to make sense for Lewiston. So we want to make sure that it's a good fit from the community perspective. And then the bottom part of this graphic here is dedicated to some of the health and wellness aspects of the plan. We did get a grant from Blue Cross of Idaho, which is having us look into some of those well-being and health aspects of the plan and how, you know, the city actually affects people's health and their lives in the environment, the built environment, which is great from a planning perspective because it's kind of, you know, we're rooted in health. That's where the legal basis of planning even comes from, is that public health, safety, and welfare. It's the first one. So we want to make sure that it's a big element in this plan. I did want to mention we have a steering committee, and I know a number of you are on the committee, and so you're familiar. But for those of you who are not, I wanted to just kind of get you aware of this committee and the work we've been doing with them so far. It is essentially a sounding board for us as the project to kind of say, hey, we've got questions on, you know, issue X, Y, and Z, and we're working on this aspect, you know, what is the right fit for the community? So it's a sounding board for the project team to make sure that, again, we're doing things that are in line with what makes sense for Lewiston. They also are helping us with reviewing, you know, plans and concepts and things that come along through the process. We also rely heavily on them to help advocate for the plan. So, you know, when things come across, when we're doing surveys or other outreach events, it's great to have their networks to tie into to help spread the word. So that really helps amplify those outreach efforts. We do have a pretty large committee, a lot, you know, a number of city staff, but I know so many folks in Lewiston wear 2 hats and 3 hats. So we're excited to have this group with us, but we do have members representing city council, you know, a number of boards and commissions, including the planning commission, and then partner with community organizations. We have some from, you know, for instance, Idaho Public Health, the Port, LC State. So we have a number of community members on there in addition to city staff. We did ask them what they want Lewiston to be known for, and this is some of the feedback we heard in our initial steering committee meeting. So again, I think it's funny, a lot of people mention the same kind of things. Great places to raise families, access to the outdoors, and also some of the innovation and development. So maybe some of those economic aspects as well that were mentioned. Here's another slide of what folks were looking for. Again, we have more talk about, you know, a local destination and advancing that quality of life. And again, beautiful natural resources and, you know, just basically a great place to live. And then also there were some great mentions for the Four Seasons golfing and fun. I don't think that the weather is a drawback for many people, so it's nice to have you know, a sunny spot. Sorry about that. Okay. Some of the things you can expect from this initial phase, as I mentioned, we're kind of wrapping it up, but these are the things we are working on completing and getting drafts out to the steering committee and city staff and a number of folks. And the first and biggest thing of phase 1 is the existing conditions. It's kind of a well, at minimum, it's going to cover everything that's required by the state, which includes a lot of things, you know, from looking at schools, looking at land uses, you know, these kinds of things. But we're also utilizing some of the existing research and things that are available. I know the city is currently working with Mosaic on a 5-year consolidated plan for fair housing. And so we're using some of that available data since it's very recent to help with these existing conditions. We are also going to be looking at a wider range of those housing options, you know, from the 20-year projection of those housing stock needs. So in addition to that, we're going to be conducting a health conditions assessment. And that's part of that health element that we're looking at to try to make sure that we're incorporating those components into the plan. And, you know, evaluating what's essentially in need of most improvement. But I think that this report is typically, well, we have some examples to show you. We like to use kind of a format that's maybe a little bit more graphic heavy to convey some of these ideas and principles fairly quickly and easily, make it a lot more legible for folks. So it's not just like a giant document with a whole bunch of tiny little text. We're looking at kind of some of these examples in these existing conditions. So we're working on those, and we'll get the report leak out to you all once that draft is complete and staff's had a chance to review as well. Another element of this initial package of deliverables for phase 1 is the plan audit. So the existing plan is pretty old, right? It was scoped to sort of go through the year 2020. So now that we're beyond that, a lot of it is sort of aged out of relevance. But we are looking at some of the most recent components of the plan, primarily the waterfront sections of the plan, and kind of evaluating what makes sense on those. What do we want to carry forward? How do we like to use that? But we're doing that in conjunction with a number of other plans, like the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, Downtown Master Plan, the Transportation Master Plan, the Strategic Plan, and Water and Sewer Master Plans. All of those kind of looking at those elements and saying, hey, are these lining up? And so we're going to be looking through those again for relevance. Does this still make sense? And how does that stack up against some of the existing regulatory guidance and policy that's in place? We've used a online survey tool for city staff and things to go through and check out what that looks like, and they've given us some feedback on some of those, which has been helpful. But it really just gives us an idea of what people like, what people don't like about the existing plan. Again, here's kind of a next step here would be a community vision. So this is what we're getting into in some of the phase 2 deliverables. So this vision document is basically the overarching sort of lighthouse, if you will, of the plan. It's going to be the thing that we're looking to make sure that this is the thing we're going to be working toward. And so it's a community guided process to get to this vision. It's to get an understanding of what the community wants to see and where they want to head. So this is kind of the destination, if you will, of the roadmap, trying to say, hey, this is where we want to get to.
Joanne, if I can add a little more, we talked, and as you'll see, once Joe starts presenting some of the results from this first phase of engagement, we've been asking people similar questions to what we asked you today. What do you want Lewiston to be known for in the future, or what do you love about Lewiston today? And trying to understand what are these values that the community has for Lewiston, because it's based on that feedback that we pull a lot of themes and ideas to start crafting a preliminary vision statement. However, because you've also done some recent plans and studies, we'll also look at what are maybe some of those guiding elements or vision statements from those documents to make sure that we also capture some of these recent ideas or shared visions that have been created for Lewiston, just to build on those recent processes. So and that's something that will come out again from public input that we've been getting, but also from this plan audit process that we're working on as part of phase 1.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and the other component, I guess, of phase 2 that we will be working on is this opportunity section. And so in addition to the vision, this is the opportunities where we're saying, hey, look, we have the chance to do something really cool in this part right here. And, we could improve this here or that there. So it's, again, that community vision where we're working with the community to understand what those opportunities are and what we can do to sort of improve the quality of life and get to that vision. So this is some of the opportunities that we have in getting there. Finally, obviously the phase three, the big deliverable here is the plan document. So once we have that vision and those opportunities, then we'll kind of go back to the drafting stage and come up with a draft plan that will, take to obviously the community and the commissions and get a lot of feedback on the draft plan as well. And then in addition to a round of public feedback on this third phase, just to make sure that it's the right fit and we can make any changes before it goes back to the council for adoption. So with that, I did want to get into some of the outreach opportunities we've had recently. Like I mentioned, we're kind of at the end of phase one. So we've been working on things for a minute. We had a kind of launch week earlier this year in April. We went to Art Under the Elms and we were there for 3 days talking to the community, getting information from people. We also had a online survey that we gave, and we also had some interviews that we did in person as well. I'll kind of show you what those look like in a little more detail, but in addition to that, to try to get the word out, we have a project website. We've also had a number of social media and press releases. I also know that we've had a lot of word of mouth thanks to Katie in the room there. She's been doing wonders to help spread the word with everybody in town she knows. And other community members have pitched in to help again spread the word. I think in a community like Lewiston, I think it's important that that word of mouth is part of this campaign process because people tend to trust the information they're getting from someone they know. So it's definitely a really powerful tool. Here are some of the Facebook posts we did in order to kind of get people to take our questionnaire, our initial questionnaire. We did have a pretty good response rate with a lot of these. That we saw a pretty big spike when the social media post went out. So you do have a fairly active social media community in Lewiston, which is good. And then, as I mentioned, we did some interviews. We were up there talking with many people there in that same building where you're sitting now, where we had about 15 folks so far. We have a couple more people that we're trying to catch up with that we missed on the interview window earlier, but that was one-on-one interviews for about 45 minutes. As you mentioned, there's some of you in the room had taken one of those. We also had a number of city staff. We had the mayor, council members. We had heads of sort of community organizations in town and some key players that we wanted to get a better understanding of their perspective of Lewiston and what the opportunities and challenges are from their perspective. As I mentioned, we did go to the Art Under the Elms festival. We had 3 days of outreach where we got to talk to a lot of different people, get some feedback on what they loved about Lewiston and what they wish were improved. So that was really fun. You see all these little sticky notes people wrote on here, what they thought, and kind of gave us some information on a map about where they kind of live, work, and play. So we got to see where people like to be, where people are from. And it was great. We got handed out a lot of information cards with the survey on there so people could get in touch with the website, find out more information. And then finally, obviously, the main thing about that was getting people to take this questionnaire. It was really well received, I think, for a community of 35,000. We had over almost 2,000 responses, which is great. So we will take that. That's a pretty good response rate. And with that, I can kind of get into some of the questions that we asked and give you a little sneak peek at some of this data. Most of the people we talked to or took the actual survey were definitely people who live and work in town full time. So upwards of 70% of people were in Lewiston residents, and a lot of them obviously go to school and work here. So that's kind of who we were hearing from on this survey. We asked people what neighborhood they live in, and they, a lot of these others were like, I live in the Orchards, but I'm not sure which part, because we did have like kind of East Orchards, West Orchards, to get a little bit more specific idea of where folks were. But we heard from a big variety of neighborhoods, so it was great that we weren't hearing from just one part of town. We also heard from a pretty diverse age range of people, which was great. So it was good to hear from people of all different ages and in town and demographics that way. The time in Lewiston was interesting too. We heard from a lot of people who have been here a very good long time. Over half of the people said they'd been here for 20 years or plus. And then 5% was that write-in. And if you look at the comments in the write-in, they're mostly, I've been here all my life, or I've been here for 30 years or 40 years. So a lot of very longtime residents. We also asked people to kind of tell us what they loved about Lewiston. Small town feel. I think that resonated with a lot of the the planning commission here, and those outdoor recreations, and again that family friendly environment. And then waterfront, you see kind of how that comes into play. I did want to mention some of the other responses we heard were that their family was here. They liked that was close. They liked the weather. Sometimes they indicated they liked the political climate in Lewiston. So a pretty diverse range of things people liked. We also asked them what they wanted Lewiston to be known for in the future. And you can see here, economy actually was a big element. People definitely wanted that economic strength. Safety and health and well-being also very strongly up on these rankings. The other category that we got into, about 5% of people selected that, and most people mentioned something to the effect of, it was a good place to raise a family or live or retire. They also mentioned, some people said that they liked the infrastructure, the roads, and the job opportunities, and also low taxes. So, I think that's a big driver for some folks. And I also wanted to cover this one here, and it's a little bit more philosophical in this one. We know that change takes time; it doesn't happen overnight. And so we asked them, what would you like us to focus on in the next 10 to 20 years, the life of this plan? And again, the economy aspect really came out, strengthening those employment opportunities and economic vitality, including those retail options. I know a lot of folks have mentioned retail and restaurant and entertainment as being a big element in things they would love to see more of in the future. And then housing. Housing is always a big element, and Lewiston is no different. It's the times we live in that housing is expensive and harder to come by. So I think that is a big focus that we're going to have coming out of the plan, just based off of some of this feedback and the discussions we've had so far. I did want to mention in the other category, a lot of people mentioned, again, more retail options. They also mentioned improving infrastructure like roads and sidewalks, as well as additional economic development comments. So that's what we heard there. Are there any questions about the survey or some of the feedback we've heard so far?
I would like to add, just for transparency, and that how we got to these options, because as I'm sure you're noticing here, we gave them multiple choices to choose from, but we still gave them an option to this other option they were able to write in, and this is where we got some additional information. But as you can see, most people did choose some of the available options, and the way we developed those were from conversations with staff, with the steering committee, and with our sub-consultants. So we had a lot of layers of getting to the preliminary options in our questionnaires, and then getting staff feedback, steering committee feedback, and our sub-consultants feedback. So yeah, and I mean, it's something that we do in an effort to streamline the participation from the public, because we know that it's easier for them to participate. It's faster. It takes less of their time when you give them these options. But also from our side, like in terms of analyzing that data, it's a lot easier to do it this way, and a lot more effective, especially when we have such a good turnout like we did in Lewiston, and we hope to have similar turnout as we continue to engage the public. So you can imagine having to go through very lengthy responses from close to 2,000 people, how different that would be. So anyways, just to share a little bit about the process, how we got there.
Chairman Joel Plaskon, city planner, comment?
He's asking for permission, Mike.
Go ahead, Joel.
So just for a little context, so we're going to be taking the results of this questionnaire that you're looking at here, as well as the results of another questionnaire that we'll be doing in phase 2 that will be coming up very shortly, that will go into a little bit more depth, and then using those results for development of the preliminary goals and strategies of the plan, and the drafting of the future land use map, which are 2 very key components of the next phase.
That's right. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, and we're working on a phase 1 summary on this public engagement efforts that will kind of summarize a lot of these key findings from this particular round of engagement. And then, like Joel mentioned, we'll be digging deeper to get into these key themes that are emerging, and finding out, hey, you mentioned you want more retail options. Well, what does that really look like to you? So getting a little more information, a little bit more specific with the types of questions and the types of things people want to see changed. Okay. Well, with that, I want to kind of have some time for group questions and discussion here. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we touch on while we're, again, still at the end of phase 1 is, talking a little bit about the existing plan. And I know that, we mentioned we're really focused on some of the more new elements, like the waterfront element, for instance. That said, are there aspects of the plan that might be working well that you think we should carry over into the new plan? Or are there things that you think are not working well and we need to make sure we address those when we get into the new plan?
Sure. Joe, I know the waterfront plan is fairly recent, but also the airport plan was also fairly recent. And
I apologize. Yeah, that is part of the plan audit. It does include the airport element as well. So yeah, we're trying to incorporate those more recent elements, carry them forward. So yeah, that is part of the process. Apologies, I forgot that element when my speech here.
Other than that, I mean, yeah, that's all I had.
Okay.
It looks
Are
like
there elements of those that you might think are working better than others, or things that you want to make sure we keep or revise?
I didn't have any real specifics. I just know that that community development that really worked hard on creating that, and to fit in with the community recently. So I thought it was something that could easily be brought forward.
Mr. Chair, this is Joel again.
Go ahead, Joel.
So maybe just to help generate a little bit more discussion about this, if you think about times when you may, as a commissioner, have looked at the comprehensive plan for consideration of a particular upcoming land use application hearing, or reviewed the comprehensive plan staff report section on a particular land use application, are there things about the plan that you've noticed when looking at those 2 things that you think need improvement or just are not working, or others that are working very well in your observation, based on your having to consider the comp plan in your land use making decisions?
Question. I consider it every chance I can, but I don't use it as a general, guidelines.
I don't know, I don't think I've ever viewed it, I don't think I've ever seen it where the comprehensive plan is designed in such a way, or that we've ever had a land use issue or permit or what have you come to us, that the comprehensive plan prevents it from being done in some form. I do appreciate that the comprehensive plan now has the waterfront plan, and I would just emphasize that we continue to work on waterfront development, just utilizing that resource to the fullest. I understand that there's a balancing act with the environment and things like that that go into developing the riverfront, but I can't honestly think of a case where I've at least viewed the comprehensive plan as like a barrier to somebody doing a land use. I mean, there's obviously hoops and processes that they have to go through to change that land usage, or get a permit as an example, but I don't think I can think of a case where it's been a deliberate obstacle.
I've appreciated when Katie and Joel have suggested changes be made to the current comprehensive plan, and we've voted on them and sent them onto the city council to be changed. And also the system, that point system, that FIBZ or whatever it's called, that Joel has developed, I think we really appreciate that being part of the future, present and future plan with the point system. I think that was really a good addition to the comprehension plan, in my opinion.
For what little I've dabbled in it, maybe this isn't necessarily I like the idea of developing the vacant lots or the structures and buildings that are no longer functional as they were intended at the beginning. You know, as we start to expand out towards the river, I understand the comprehensive plan also wants to address future growth, future revisitation of neighborhoods as they impact, you know, travel, and I struggle that we continuously, or I feel, look in at the individual neighborhoods that we can tweak or give way to more growth or more four-laners or more, you know, instead of what isn't developed or what is no longer used intentionally as it began. And so the comprehensive plan talks about the riverfront. I think we need stronger plans on how we can get the existing tenants or owners to we need people to come in and, I don't know, motivation to move businesses away from Snake River, so that Snake River itself, because I don't see Clearwater, the Clearwater side being what we're developing. I see it as Snake. And maybe I'm wrong there, because I know it's kind of the whole thing, we're never gonna get rid of the levee. So for me, I think where it's not working is getting the land turned over from existing tenants and owners to a more community-friendly, you know, park type thing. I love the idea of developing it. I just don't think we have the means to flip the purpose of the properties.
Chairman?
Mr. Chair, comment, response?
Go ahead.
So that's a great observation. There's only so much that the city can do. We don't have control over market conditions necessarily, at least not directly. But I think your point gets to the fact that I think anyway, and I think you're saying the same thing in a different way, need a stronger implementation element in our comprehensive plan. It's not really been a huge focus or a priority for actual implementation, at least not proactively. We've been more reactive. And so I think that's probably where a focus of attention needs to be in the new plan. And that implementation, if we're going to be doing proactive implementation really needs a lot more time and effort at the staff level, more staff resources, as well as more time spent by the Planning and Zoning Commission doing proactive type planning work, as opposed to just reacting to land use applications.
Well, and if I may respond to that, we have seen conditional use permits come forward that are addressing spaces currently on Snake. And given the criterias and the examples, I think each one of us wanted to develop a more visually pleasing, corridor, functional type things. I hear a lot about we want those parks and these, I love the Pioneer Park events, the music, the events, we have it down here at the square. So as I see properties that come up or start to change hands, we had one recently, I believe it was the pest control, which is right at the beginning of that corridor. What I think we're not doing well is getting out to the community. We want to develop this whole corridor, and I don't know how we do that, because we have firmly entrenched businesses that have no reason to move, but maybe need to purchase and expand themselves where they sit. And that's I think our stumbling block is does the community want a walking corridor that is a destination in itself? We're never gonna get rid of the levees, because there's river. So how do we develop those spaces so that is where people wanna go, they wanna hang out, they wanna, we want restaurants along that way and more those type things. How do we do that if we've got entities, whether it's a boat business or a manufacturing plant or which we have more of that downtown than we have a place we want to go hang out.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Joel.
So that is that idea is more than just complicated. It's explicitly spelled out in the current waterfront plan to develop an incentive program to relocate those types of businesses and industries that aren't as compatible as they could be with being in proximity to the waterfront, right?
Yes. I know we've laid it out, Joel. I know we've laid it out.
Yeah. So that idea was brought to the city council, but it was during COVID-19. And so it was just bad timing. But we definitely want to revisit that. I just encourage the commission between now and the end of the new comp plan drafting period to, as you are considering land use applications and looking at the comp plan section of the staff report, if on an individual case-by-case basis you are noticing something about the comp plan that you really like, or that's working, or that you don't like and is not working, or that you're struggling with, to just kind of make note of that, over the next 10 months as we develop the draft of the plan, so that we can incorporate your observations about your use and consideration of the plan into developing the new one.
If I may, when I think about expansion, areas of impact, expansion of, let's say, LC, expansion, I think if we continue as a commission to permit loss of neighborhoods and expansion for these entities, we are going to lose some of the very things in our community that draw people. Impacts to neighborhoods, residential going to commercial, the growth. And so, I've been a pretty firm advocate about not losing what we have that's good to theoretically match need. There's a lot of university towns that their kids live all over town. It's not specifically the walking living campus, so to speak. And so I think what I would like as a commissioner and as a resident is to make certain that when we are considering these things, when we are talking to the community, that we're not actually ruining one of our gems for the betterment, you know, I mean, if we're not making them uncomfortable, they're not going to relocate. And I'm sorry, I mean, I know that there's a balance and a balancing act. But the impetus to get commercial to move further, I don't know, North Lewiston, Northeast Lewiston, you know, like get the commercial areas, especially manufacturing and those kind of things, to not be in the prime real estate is about the only thing I can think of. And that's one opinion. I know that we're addressing waterfront, and I would really like to see that continue. I would love to see living and parks and yeah, sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So is there a possibility of getting I don't know if you could get grants or whatever, getting a technology park somewhere outside, like she's maybe North Lewiston, and it costs money. I've talked to some of those businesses and they would be willing to relocate. I know that for a fact, but it takes a lot of money to get them to do that. And so other cities have developed technology parks for those businesses to relocate to. Could that be something that could be part of the comprehensive plan or a way to, I don't know, to do that?
Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can definitely incorporate elements like that if you have, you know, something where you're like, hey, you know, maybe one of the things we want to focus on is, you know, we've stated that we want to relocate some of these land uses, but where do we want them to move to? And maybe we look at ways to make that happen. You know, as part of the implementation strategy that we would build in the plan, there would be, you know, those kind of action steps as to things that the city would do in the future to help accomplish the goals in the plan. And if, you know, technology park type thing is part of that, you know, maybe that comes about with some of those policy actions that could come out of the plan at the end.
That could be something, because a lot of times in plans like this, we talk about partnerships, right? So Valley Vision and the port are partners with the city, right? Those are both organizations that the port owns land. Valley Vision recruits businesses, so there's, I think, some opportunities there to work with those organizations to try to do that kind of stuff. And like Joel said, you know, that a policy was drafted with that incentive program kind of outlined. So maybe at the end of this process, that's something that, you know, we speak to those partners, we try to get council on board, and maybe that's part of that implementation, you know, to give some push to an idea like that.
Yeah, there is a big business out there that for the right amount of money would relocate someplace else. But it's gonna take millions of dollars for them to do that.
Right, yeah, 'cause it's expensive to get your infrastructure in, and it's expensive to build your buildings and
willing
move
to
your
do.
equipment and do all those things.
And the port's been really, really good about that too. They're trying to recruit businesses.
Yep, because they would like to fill up the land that they own, they would like to do leases or sell or whatever.
It's just slow going. Commissioner Kelly?
Mr. Chair, thank you. One of the aspects or lack of, it seems like there was a lack of planning for infill in the last comprehensive plan. And I know that that's something that we've focused on a lot in the last, well, since 2017, since I've been involved. So something, you know, focusing on that would be as much as we can.
Sure.
You know, and then as far as just land kind of management.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Joel.
Well, again, in response to Commissioner Ball's comments, that's very observant. That's in the plan too, already in the waterfront plan. It's the very first goal of the Clearwater North sub-area. That's to facilitate development and redevelopment, primarily to relocate businesses to the Clearwater North sub-area, which is basically the east side of North Lewiston, from other sub-areas for large-scale industrial manufacturing, research and development, including the establishment of an industrial business park.
I had read that, if you'll forgive me, I'd read that and that's, I think that's a nail that really needs to be pounded. That's something I appreciated that will make it more possible to develop, to pull the people in for the event centers and the kids and the parks and the businesses. Recently months ago at a meeting, we had a number of individuals come up from the community and talk about how Snake River was it was in opposition of a development that's coming down the road, but discussion about that they wanted walking shops and restaurants and places to sit and listen to music and kids can play and all of those things, and I am 1000% for that. But what is there now is probably 60 to 70% not a walking, enjoyable destination area with pockets that are slowly moving forward. And as you think about even the port areas, as the community grows, we're pushing out the quote unquote less than necessary. Like I think about and I'm not targeting anybody, but just even downtown, we have a hotel and what it stares at is Les Schwab's community of buildings. And so if we want a walking downtown, if we want a walking riverfront area, when we start to consider relocating these larger businesses or trying to figure out how to encourage these larger businesses to relocate, we also have to think about the view. I think on the port side, they have a much better view of the river than we do because they don't have the levees. And North Lewiston, down by Pepsi Park, I believe it is, and out that way, again, we've got car dealerships starting to move in, but I think that those in their own ways have, I mean, residential appeal, or could have, if those were developed. And so I think the comprehensive plan as it's written specifically with respect to the waterfront is great. It's trying to get the full community behind it so that we have an awareness that everybody's got a responsibility. So when a property comes up, like the pest control place, when it came up, it's, maybe we have a, I don't know, partnership that allows the community to make sure that the property is purchased rather than just going to a different pest control thing.
It was purchased.
By another pest control
Right,
thing.
but
So
how do you
again,
control that? I mean.
no,
is
I
it-
know, that's what I'm saying. So if a community wants to develop these things, then there has to be some, I wouldn't call it a pot of cash, but partnerships in the community, whether it's all of the ones we've talked about, whether it's grants, to see if there's any way before that's offered on the free market, that the owners come and say, okay, do you guys have the means or grants, or how do we get those properties into the possession of the community so that they get developed the direction that we want in the comprehensive waterfront plan?
So you want the city to buy?
No, I don't know. That's what I'm saying, is how do we do that? How do we get, the city doesn't have the checkbook to go write these checks. You know, does the city own this, the other end of the big property that we want developers? Okay, so how do we partnership with people with checkbooks, big checkbooks?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
That's big checkbooks.
Joe,
Yeah,
help
that's
us
a
with the
lot,
big
that's a lot of money.
Yes, Joe.
Okay, so that goal that I referenced earlier, the very first objective for that goal is to develop an economic development and business support program to aid in funding infrastructure improvements, identify real estate opportunities, provide zoning incentives, which might include transferable development rights, which is part of the Idaho Code on the Local Land Use Planning Act, to allow for permit processing and fee incentives, and/or to allow tax incentives for industrial, manufacturing, wholesale storage, and distribution and large-scale retail business development and redevelop to relocate to that area. So again, it's a matter of implementation.
Great.
Yeah, and I would say looking at the development of Lewiston, which is further out, where our area of impact keeps going further out, you're gonna need something, whether it's the waterfront or revitalized downtown, whatever that looks like, to draw those individuals in.
Well, the historic district, the downtown, we have some beauty. We have some beauty and we have some history.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a gem we need to polish. And so when I know because I did read the waterfront plan, I know that we have talked about economic development, I know that we have talked about incentive plans. Implementation, yes, more of that, I think is the first step. I mean, we've got it documented, now we gotta figure out how to do that.
Brass tacks of funding it, and things like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that dovetails really nicely into the next question we had for you all. And that was kind of what tools would help you in the new comprehensive plan. And so I'm hearing pretty loud and clear implementation steps and a clear path to that could be of use for you all. Are there other aspects that could be really helpful when making decisions as the when applications come before you or decisions come across your desk as to how could this plan, what tools can we put in it to better help you with your decisions?
Good question.
that's a
I have
good
no idea.
question, huh?
Yeah, I mean, funding comes and goes.
How about you, Katie? What do you got over there?
Just because this is something that I have seen from the group and the questions that you've asked me as staff when I come in front of you with the applications that are submitted. I've noticed that you guys do spend time looking at the descriptions of future land uses and the desired outcomes. So I think having clear ideas about redevelopment in the plan, desired outcomes for certain neighborhoods, all neighborhoods, in the plan would be helpful. I know that you guys have you've spent time reading through that material and looking at those items very closely. So I feel like this commission and commissions in the future will probably do the same, I would hope. So I think having items like that, having a clear direction of how the different neighborhoods want to develop or redevelop, clear direction about, I guess personally, I would like to see some more cohesive zoning in the plan. Our city as a whole has a lot of patchwork, pockmarked zoning. So for me personally, I would like to see zoning looked at in a manner that actually reflects those definitions of the different zones. So when you see your commercial corridors and you see your higher density and medium density residentials, those zones are meant to be buffering commercial corridors before you get to low density. And in a lot of instances in Lewiston, we have commercial corridor, low density. And there's not those buffer zones in between where things like higher density residential can be done, apartment complexes, townhouses, a lot of those variety of housing types that you guys have seen come in front of you in conditional use permits and rezone applications. I think if the plan gave us more direction on some redevelopment when it came to the zoning of areas, just based off of the applications we've seen in the last handful of years, and the questions that you guys normally ask me when I'm doing presentations, I feel like those are things that you guys look at a lot. If all of that made sense, Joe.
Yes, to me it makes sense. I guess, are there other elements too, in addition to for instance, those descriptions of land uses and those outcomes? Are there things that you rely on in the plan or wish you're I wish we had a section that talked about this so that we can, use that when we're making decisions?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Normally what we do is we just try to make the land work for the situation that we have. And it does seem like we're more proactive than we are, or more reactive than we are.
I'll say to a degree, but I think that depends. I mean, it kind of goes back to what Cynthia talked a little bit about too, which is in commercial encroaching on residential might be a case where that isn't necessarily always the case, because that's kind of a balancing act. And we as a commission have tended to fall on one side or the other side, and I understand for like a rationale standards that it's a balancing act for all the things that we have to analyze. But that's kind of one of those cases where it's not necessarily that case. I mean, we don't want to deny somebody a land use change or a CUP as another example, if they don't fit everything to a T, but there are cases where that doesn't necessarily apply, because there's other aspects involved with it as well.
On that, we, as a community, I've been here 8 years, as a community, I watch any time a commercial endeavor asks for a conditional use permit to do something in a zone that's not open to it. If it passes, the commission is attacked because we're all about pro-business and we're just doing favors for those with money. If it doesn't pass, then we're anti-business.
We don't have vision.
Yeah, we call that catch-22.
But one of the things that really caught my attention recently, and I've said this before and I'll say it again because Gabe was looking at me when he talked about this, is I think you have to be very cautious as a community when you allow businesses those conditional use permits to creep into residential areas, because then what happens is you'll get a financial institution that has the means to plop cash down on a resident that's supposed to remain a residence, and then they come in here and ask forgiveness and change. So what I call it is a flesh-eating disease of commercial starting to encroach onto residentials, where again, we are now jeopardizing, because at some point, people will want to move out of that area because now all of a sudden, you know, it's more than a mini mart, or it's more than a tire shop, or it's yet another storage thing. So I think in with respect to what Katie has to say, we want to talk about buffers, and we want to, and I'm assuming, Kevin, when you said infilling, you were talking about properties within the specific zones already and how we're gonna develop. Did I read you wrong on that?
No,
Okay, so I think that we have to understand where are those areas of impact, and do we allow commercial, or do we restrict it to more high density residential, and try to preserve and put those buffers in place without flipping the coin, so that all of a sudden it's not appealing to live downtown, and it's not appealing to live out by the college, and it's not appealing to live, you know, on the bench, because now all of a sudden we have all of these businesses. I mean, all you have to do is drive to Home Depot on a weekend, and you know that those great big areas of commercial, I mean, now it jumps over to the other side. They punch that road all the way through, you know, so there's places for commercial to grow. And if it's a good commercial endeavor, it draws the people. End of subject. I don't think they have to camp them right into the gems that we do have that we should be fighting to preserve. So I like the idea of a buffer more clearly defined as commercial continues to grow Thane, and now unfortunately taking some houses out on Bryden, and because you just see the progression. And if we want to be a community where it's great to raise your kids, then we want to keep those neighborhoods where kids can skateboard down the street without being picked off by, you know, high flow traffic.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Joe.
this is Joel again. So a suggestion I have, an idea I just had, I hadn't thought about this prior, but Commissioner Boney mentioned the balancing act relative to the comp plan. And Joe from Logan Simpson mentioned in his presentation, the comprehensive plan is comprehensive. So it's almost inherent you're going to find competing interests in the comprehensive plan and competing interests in consideration of land use application requests. So I'm wondering if in our new comp plan, because our current one doesn't have this, there's a way where we could lend some different weighting criteria, weighting as in heaviness, right? Or prioritization of the various goals and objectives in the plan, so that they're all not just laid out there neutrally. So I guess, maybe that would help you in deciding how to make your decisions where you have competing interests. Which way do you go? So transportation versus natural resources, or protection of existing housing stock versus commercial expansion areas. Some sort of weighting criteria or guidance. And I guess I'd ask Joe and Emily, have you encountered in other comprehensive plans that you worked on incorporation of that idea? And can it work? Does it work? Is it reasonable?
Yeah, I think that we can have a segment that maybe includes some decision-making criteria, because we know that a request is going to come across your table that may not necessarily fit with the exact land use that was envisioned on the map, but it could have merits to the proposal that actually could help further the goals of the comprehensive plan. And so having some criteria of some ways that you can, some items that you can consider when you're looking at those kinds of requests that, well, does it meet this, and this, and if it's helping to kind of push the ultimate goal of the plan further along, it might allow you to have a little bit of flexibility to understand, when those sorts of changes are appropriate and when they're not. But furthermore, to one of the commissioner's points, that you're not seen as just being pro-business or anti-business. You're saying, look, this is our plan and we're trying to follow it. And you can use those tools in the plan to help kind of guide those decisions.
So does the commission feel like that's something you'd like incorporated into the new plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, duly noted.
Preservation of existing neighborhoods I would like to see that.
I mean, I would like to see some sort of weighting framework, but it not structured in such a way that it makes us have to make a decision one way or the other, that obviously we still have the flexibility to make a decision on the individual request or the individual land use or conditional use permit relative to other factors for how it fits the plan. So if it's a commercial encroaching on residential, that's a factor, but there are other factors that we also consider when we make a rationale statement, as an example, and just so that those are not completely crowded out, although I'm not sure they can be completely crowded out, but just I like the idea of that as a tool, but not having it also constrain the decision that we as a body can make.
Right.
It can give us some direction, but that doesn't mean it's the direction we have to go, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, we typically in our comprehensive plans, or the comprehensive plans that we've been doing recently for different communities, and many of them in Idaho, we do have a section in our implementation chapter that we call prioritization considerations, or something along the lines, and it's just a bullet list of things, and I'll read the subheadings now, but it's basically a list that would help you as decision makers, or as those giving recommendations, to city council. What are some of the things that need to be considered when you're prioritizing, right? Like from different decisions. And some of them are, and this is in order. So health, safety, welfare, and code compliance. Of course, do they really comply with code? Ease of implementation. So something that capitalizes on opportunities that can be easily implemented, and considering capacity and gains and development ready projects and stuff like that. Of course, community significance. So things that would provide benefit to many people within the community as opposed to a selected group of individuals. And that's in terms of, just just having that community significance. Of course, partnerships for funding. You may want to capitalize on a window of opportunity for some sort of partnership, and that will, of course, like put an opportunity at the top of your list because you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. If it satisfies an urgent need, something that has already been identified as a need for the community. Also, if it contributes to completing the phasing of a current or ongoing project. And of course, if there's plan integration with some of the other plans and studies that the city currently has. So this is more general, but I really like all the suggestions that you've been given in terms of land use specifically. And I think that if we use this list as a starting point and we then add to it, given all these ideas that we've been discussing tonight, I think it could be a great tool and not as restrictive as I believe Gabe was mentioning, because you don't want something that will then restrict what you do with a comprehensive plan or what you do with your land use decisions either. So it should be a guidance, but not a restrictive tool.
Yeah, Lewiston, we're blessed with existing businesses that need to expand, homegrown businesses that need to expand. And they're just not gonna move up to McCann Mountain up there and pay the rent that they're charging when they own their own chunk of land here. Big believer in letting businesses do their thing here. Gotta have jobs.
Okay, so what other questions did you guys have, Joe?
Well, that is it on our questions. So we can go over some of the next steps. Again, we're working on the kind of wrapping up that phase 1 deliverable package, which includes the plan audit, the existing conditions, and then the phase 1 outreach summary. And then we have another steering committee meeting coming up mid-June. And then another second series of public engagement is going to be kicking off in July for that vision element to get more specific into the themes that we're hearing so far and digging a little bit deeper with the community as to what that means to them. But that is all I had for you tonight, unless there's any other questions or anything that we can answer for you.
Questions? I don't see any. Thanks again, Joe. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to our next agenda item. That is staff communications.
So we would like to introduce Justin, who is our newest commissioner. So Justin, if you want to give your name and how long you've lived in Lewiston and
Favorite color, favorite
What-
food.
our tradition.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, my name is Justin. I moved to Lewiston about 3 years ago. Before that, I lived in Clarkston Heights for about a year. Before that, California. Had to get away from the hustle and bustle. I'm really just here to see what the community is, help out, kind of improve things. Down in Sacramento, it was a little too busy and hectic to get involved. So up here, the pace is a little easier to kind of step in and help out.
And so then I guess the only other communication would be a query of commissioners for our June 14th meeting. Currently, we do not have any applications that have been submitted, so we could consider canceling that one. Joel, you don't have anything on the table that you're aware of, do you?
I do not.
I have not received anything, so it would be possible for us to cancel that meeting if the commission so chooses.
And sorry for the interruption, Katie, but do you need Joe and
Nope, you guys are free to go. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and going through the plan.
All right, thank you, everyone. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you, Katie. And before we adjourn, how about that, canceling the next meeting? I kind of like that, have a break, that last
Yeah, I think that's a
That's
good idea.
So
I'm in
everyone
favor.
approves, give it the thumbs up. Katie, let's cancel that
Okay.
meeting.
I'll be in this room or have a meeting before then with the comprehensive plan.
That you're-
Next meeting in June, so.
There you
All
go.
right.
Yeah, so June 12th is the next steering
Is the
committee
next one?
meeting for
Okay.
our steering committee.
At
but-
noon?
At noon.
All right. The last item on the agenda is item number 6. It's our adjournment, and Justin, do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
That sounds like a good one. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second that
It's
motion.
been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? That passes.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Nice job. It took me like
So-
six meetings to make a